Episodes 1 and 2, Legendary Turn of the Golden Witch. It is morning on Rokenjima. The Golden Witch extends her impatient, heartfelt greetings. The seat opposite her feels like home. Another failed observer combs a shore of shipwrecked hearts, too selfish to measure their depth from the shallows. I just need to get a little closer. May Poirot guide my order and method. May Bronstein keep an eye on the clock. It's dark. Where am I, again? I was playing a mystery game with my friends, and then... There's a reason I came down this way. I'm sure of it. Oh, I should probably introduce myself before I get into all that, shouldn't I? My name is... Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm just another reader, like you. Before this, my friends and I were actually reading a story out loud in public. More and more people started showing up every week, even people who'd read it before. We were really shocked. It's kind of ridiculous to say, isn't it? It's like dancing on the street and then getting all shy when people stop to watch. Let me put it another way. Have you ever felt like your friends are just a bunch of people you tricked into thinking you're a good person? Being on stage feels the same sometimes, like some sort of backwards deception. Like I'm distracting everyone from realizing I'm boring by doing everything in my power to pretend that I'm not. Functionally, the negatives cancel each other out. I am a good person. I am not boring. But the only way to get my brain to accept a positive is by feeding it a double negative instead. I guess that's a kind of backwards deception too, isn't it? Wanting attention is a natural part of being human, I think. But we're also taught that such desires are shameful. So, we grow up telling ourselves we don't deserve the space we so desperately wish to occupy in other people's minds. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully express my gratitude to those of you who hold me in your minds. But I can try. And I can start by putting on a good show. Repay the precious time people have given me with interest. This is the story of a woman I saw dancing in the street. I think it went something like this. I didn't play a lot of video games growing up, so I guess you could call me a late bloomer. Within the past few years, I found myself drawn to puzzle mystery adventures most of all. I've linked books across the ages, drawn blueprints for hundreds of estates, reconstructed deaths on a ghost ship at sea, discovered the truth of the Golden Rule, and watched the stars go out. Once, I even solved a string of murders using a misplaced chair no other player had ever noticed before, halfway through the adventure. But that's another story. The theme I've noticed enjoying the most is one of loneliness given meaning. You step into the shoes of someone burdened with solving some great unknown, and the tools that make them uniquely suitable for the job end up the cause of their isolation. There is a similar loneliness here, too. I can feel it. I should tell you that my goal isn't to solve the mystery. As the chair I've taken this time is less than halfway through my journey, it would be presumptuous to assume I have all the pieces needed to press my attack on the board. A reader who does not adjust their interpretation based on new evidence is a poor one. The only thing more deplorable than a reader who makes little attempt to move with the story is one who feigns ignorance in order to steal the valor of deduction. The job of an author is to draw ley lines for an audience to follow, a journey along narrative meridians. When these through lines are unnecessarily broken, it can lead to the reader's expectations being betrayed. But otherwise, whether or not the reader is entertained by the journey itself is of little consequence. The pact the reader makes is only to embark. I traverse these meridians as a hapless cartographer, my charts of through lines strung up with pins and red strings, filled only with evidence I've gathered throughout the course of my journey. I bear these charts to you now, ready for my theorized paths to be redrawn by the tempo of the story's next heartbeat. That is the true joy of mystery. There are a couple of things I'd like to go over before we begin. Nothing serious, just some housekeeping to ensure we're all on the same page. Remember, I am not alone. I've been speaking as though I've been alone on this adventure, and nothing could be further from the truth. None of this would be possible without my friends and our constant discussions, even the ones that freeze our readings to indefinite standstills. Several of their theories have been folded into my current view of this world. Without their joy, we would not have drawn in the gracious audience rejoining us every week. And without that audience and their incredible assistance and encouragement throughout, I would not be here with you now. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Comparison is a flawed lens. Earlier, I mentioned I've only started playing more video games within the last few years. Well, you should also know that I'm not a very well-read person. This investigation will involve drawing parallels to things I've experienced in games and other media. If I cite an idea used in a game that the game actually borrowed from some classic piece of literature, I do not mean to credit the game for coming up with the idea. I have simply never read the book. It's best to imagine me as the person who just got into video games, eagerly pointing to something that's existed elsewhere for ages and saying, "This is just like my video game!" This will probably happen a lot, so it is easier to ask for forgiveness in advance. Heed spoiler warnings. To further the previous point, this analysis contains spoilers for the following: Umineko episodes 1 through 3 up to episode 3 chapter 12, Reverse 1999 patch 3.6 Last and First Principles, Outer Wilds 2019, and the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe Edition, skip button ending. The Red Truth Council presides. I do not fear drawing incorrect conclusions. What I do fear, however, is oversight or misinterpretation of objective fact. If I ever had a specific query, trusted veterans of this mystery kindly volunteered to collaborate and debate amongst themselves, crafting a singular red truth to offer in unanimous response. And thus, the Red Truth Council was born. Access to such power is not something I intend to take lightly. Our red truths are not to be abused to confirm or deny theories outright. They exist to prevent me from wasting time weaving intricacies upon looms of inaccurate premises. So far, I have put forth 5 repetition requests to the Council. My inquiries and their responses will be shown in full as they become relevant. I think that about covers it. Let me introduce you to the pieces on the board. On October 4th and 5th, 1986, a series of murders takes place on Rokkenjima, a privately owned island in Japan cut off from the outside world by an ill-timed typhoon. The victims are various members of the wealthy Ushiramiya family and their servants. Ushiramiya Kinzo is the reclusive head of the family, who lives full-time in the Rokkenjima mansion and refuses to leave his study. The tendrils of his abuse and greed are weaved inseparably into the lives of his kin. His recent diagnosis only gives him a few months to live. Kraus, Ava, Rudolph, and Rosa are Kinzo's children. Their individual families have gathered on the island to attend the annual Ushiramiya family conference. As Kinzo lumbers to death's door, they're all very worried about the state of their inheritance after he passes. Coincidentally, each one of them also finds themselves in need of a lot of money right now. Kraus, Kinzo's eldest, has a wife, Natsuhi, and a daughter, Jessica. They are the only other family members who live on the island full-time, in the same mansion as Kinzo. As Jessica's eventual husband will inherit the head of the household, Kraus and Natsuhi are strict with their daughter. They have both tried to raise Jessica from birth into being the aristocratic ideal of a future wife. Because of this, Jessica is in a rebellious phase, adopting attitudes and speech patterns her parents find improper. Ava, the second eldest of Kinzo's children, has a husband, Hideyoshi, and a son, George. Ava's grand plan is to have George chosen as the next head of the family, instead of Jessica's future husband. Hideyoshi, a laid-back businessman, took on the Ushiramiya family name to help further Ava's goals. They have both raised George from birth into being the aristocratic ideal of a future family head. Compared to Jessica, George is a model successor. Rudolph... Don't mind that guy, he just doesn't like planes much. Rudolph, Kinzo's third child, has a wife, Kyrie, and a son, Battler. Kyrie is Rudolph's second wife, while Battler is the son of Rudolph's first marriage. Rudolph and Kyrie also have a daughter, Battler's sister Angie, who is too ill to make it to the conference this year. As such, we haven't seen her yet. We also don't know if Angie is the daughter of Rudolph's first or second marriage. Interestingly, whether Battler considers her one of the Ushiromiya cousins differs between script versions. Almost like she exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Rosa is the youngest of Kinzo's children. She has a daughter named Maria. The father is no longer involved. Maria is heavily coded as autistic, potentially with a developmental disability that has made her grow up very little within the past 6 years. Rosa struggles with internalizing her daughter's flaws as her own failure, which manifests as violence upon the one thing in her life she has control over. Rokkenjima also has a few staff members in its employ. Nanjo is a retired doctor and close longtime personal friend of Kinzo's. He does not live on the island, but he's been spending a lot of time here recently to monitor Kinzo's decaying health. Genji is the head servant of the mansion. He has served Kinzo the longest and is Kinzo's closest friend. Kumasawa is a part-timer who has served the family for many years, about as long as Genji, though on and off. Shannon and Kanan are among the youngest servants of the household, recruited from the orphanage Kinzo provides funding for. There, being chosen by Kinzo to work on Rokkenjima for the Ushiromiya family is considered the highest honor. We know of at least 2 other servants from the orphanage who currently work for the household, but they were not scheduled for the family conference, and therefore have not yet made an appearance. Goda is a professional chef, given a new lease on life after losing his previous position at a prestigious hotel. He was hired by Kraus and Natsuhi, making him the only servant on Rokkenjima not directly employed by Kinzo. Therefore, he is the only servant on the island not considered by the rest of the family to be Kinzo's spy. Oh, look who's feeling better. Battler is our protagonist. After his mother Asumu passed away, his father Rudolph immediately remarried. Feeling betrayed, Battler left to live with his grandparents on Asumu's side for the past 6 years. He even dropped the Ushiromiya name and went by Asumu's maiden name the entire time. This will be Battler's first family conference since 6 years ago. Kinzo spent a good portion of his life immersing himself in studies of black magic and the occult, something considered little more than a quirk by the rest of his family. It is said that, sometime during the war, Kinzo made a deal with the witch Beatrice for a large amount of gold, the source of his and his family's wealth. Kinzo was deeply in love with Beatrice, even after she passed. In his dying days, he wanted nothing more than to see her again, his wealth and descendants be damned. My understanding of the magic here is likely inaccurate, so please bear with me. In this world, the higher the risk, the more powerful the magic. Upon the start of the 1986 family conference, Kinzo initiated a ritual that put the lives of everyone on the island at stake, including his own, in order to bring Beatrice back to his plane of existence. This ritual was a gamble he created called the Witch's Epitaph that would lead whoever solved it to the location of his gold. The first portion begins with a riddle, then descends into describing the gruesome slaughter of over 13 people, one by one. The epitaph needs to be solved by the other members of his family if they wish to stop the ritual and save their lives. Otherwise, Beatrice will reclaim everything she gave Kinzo, with interest, the gold and everything he built with it, including the lives of his descendants. I imagine, from Kinzo's point of view, the bargain set forth by the epitaph was meant to rouse the spirit of the Golden Witch into participating. Perhaps participation would give her enough of a physical form to commit the murders outlined in the epitaph and collect on her promised dues before being put to rest once more. By the end of episode 1, everyone on the island is presumed dead. In the halls of Purgatory, Battler finds himself surrounded by loved ones, all voicing their astonishment over the grand displays of Beatrice's power. At first, Battler is in equal spirits. which quickly sour as he realizes they're all serious about believing magic killed them. They all argue with him, pushing the logic of his theories, asking him to explain the various feats using human capabilities instead of magic. Wouldn't it just be easier to blame the witch? But Battler continues to question, continues to think, even as everyone, including the narrative itself, protests his stubbornness. Even as Beatrice herself appears, right before his very eyes. One by one, he watches his loved ones mutilated, the invisible hand of his doubt slowly deforming their flesh into mounds of unrecognizable paste, their voices screaming, pleading with him to believe in magic, to believe in Beatrice, and put an end to their suffering. Only Jessica tells him not to give in. Only Jessica tells him to keep fighting. It is revealed that Beatrice requires unanimous belief for her resurrection to be completed and to keep the magic intact, the very magic holding the souls of his loved ones together. In the face of such abject cruelty, Battler gathers the last shreds of his remaining resolve and spitefully continues his refusal. Amused by his tenacity, she proposes a wager. She'll reset the game board and murder his family all over again, this time in ways that are harder and harder to blame on a human culprit, until he has no choice but to accept the existence of magic. The existence of Beatrice, the Golden Witch. As of the end of episode 2, the scope covered by this presentation, the epitaph has not been solved. My purpose here today is to take all I know and attempt to explain the Rokkenjima mass murders in both timelines to the best of my ability. My analysis will be guided by 3 major conclusions drawn from the series of events witnessed thus far. Everything I say from now on will be using these conclusions as truths. Should any of these truths be disproven in the future, many of my theories fall apart, but that is the joy of mystery. As these truths are derived from the narrow window I currently have of the story, they are not as infallible as red truths and are much more subject to change. So, we'll have to choose another color. This should do. Now, where have I seen this color before? It's almost as if I've stared at it hundreds of times for tens of hours and thousands of words. Maybe it'll come back to me one day. Beatrice is on the side of magic. Battler is not. Beatrice wants Battler to accept that the murders were committed with magic. Battler refuses, wanting to explain the murders as committed by human hand. Surprisingly, we do see instances of Beatrice playing fair. One prominent example of Beatrice leaving room for Battler to explain things without magic is that blood is so often not called blood by the narrative text. It's a reddish-black liquid or a stringy paint. It's not gore or viscera, it's makeup. At one point, Beatrice says, "The rules for my loss have also been established. There's nothing so boring as a game you can't lose, right?" From this, it's easy to draw the following truth. There must exist a plausible magical and non-magical explanation for everything, including every murder on the island. As we understand it, that is the focus of the game between Beatrice and Battler. Something about this surprised me. As far as I can tell, there's not a single mention of Battler winning this game, meaning he can save his family. We're all familiar with stories about a plucky young male protagonist fighting with all his might against the impossible and inspiring us with his determination. "If I disprove that magic exists, you'll let me and my family go," is something I would have expected to hear in a story like this from a boy like him. However, Battler's belief in magic has nothing to do with preventing the deaths of his loved ones, or preventing the series of events that occur on the island. According to the credits of both episodes, we're not sure whether Battler himself even survives at the end. Everyone besides him, or nearly everyone, almost certainly dies. This brings us to our second deduction. Those who are dead are dead. The purpose of the game board is only to explain, in detail, the series of events on Rokkenjima Island between October 4th and 5th, 1986. In Episode 1, a series of murders occurs. When Battler rejects Beatrice's existence, the game board is reset, and significant changes are made to counter the various explanations Battler has for phenomenon in Episode 1. For example, only 1 master key per servant with no extras, and increasing the number of locked rooms involved, along with the difficulty of solving them with the introduction of red truths. Perhaps Beatrice latched onto locked rooms because Battler had particular trouble explaining Hideyoshi and Ava's murders in Episode 1. In other words, Episode 1 had its ley lines drawn by an author. The use of magic broke Battler's expectations, and because of this, he stubbornly contested the series of events. If he is to believe in magic, he wants to see a murder only a witch could do. Episode 2's ley lines were then adjusted to force Battler into accommodating magic and the existence of a 19th person and/or witch into his expectations. This leads us to our third and final deduction. Beatrice is in control of the narrative in Episode 1 and Episode 2. At one point, I thought I may have discovered explicit confirmation of this theory with the ever-present background of the message history. I have this awful habit of looking too deeply into the background, which comes in handy for some adventures, but others not so much. Once I mistook shadows on the corner of Kinzo's study, on the corner floor of Kinzo's study, as pools of blood. Another time, I counted the light bulbs in all the lighting fixtures of every room, searching for a pattern in the numbers between them. I don't think that line of thinking will work too well for this adventure. Still, I thought it would be best to check. Repetition requested! The wallpaper of the message browser is purely decorative, having no deliberate bearing on the story. Denied. As far as the witches of the council are aware, for all known intents and purposes, the butterflies present in the background of the message board appear to be simply a stylistic choice meant to keep the witch Beatrice's presence at the forefront of the player's mind. Further, we can confirm it was added in later versions of the tale. Damn, thought I had something there. I suppose if any future episode narratives are not written by Beatrice, and the background of the message browser doesn't change, the relevance I'd theorized becomes weaker. And that's okay. We have plenty more ideas where that came from. I have a confession to make. In creating this presentation, theorizing about the murders was actually where I spent the least of my time. There was just so much more to see, to know. So much time was spent familiarizing ourselves with the pieces on the board, but I wonder, if Beatrice really was in control of the narratives for the first 2 episodes, do we really know any of these characters at all? Though they have their flaws, she set every character up in a realistic, nuanced way that afforded them each unique sympathy. All with the exception of Kinzo, who is almost comically evil compared to everyone else on the island. I can't help but think that choice was personal. Because a meta-narrative is involved, it's time to introduce a couple of tools I'll need to help explain a few of my theories. During the main journey, when I was still with my friends, I hastily cobbled together a diagram as certain thoughts came to me. The Umiception board. This feels like so long ago. But now that I've had time to retrace my steps, I've been able to refine this theory a little more. It's not as whimsical as its predecessor, but I hope I maintain some of its original charm. Please don't look too closely. I'm a writer, not an artist. There are plenty of allusions to chess within the text and how to strategize by thinking about your opponent's moves. The events on Rokkenjima are referred to consistently as a game board, with individual people as pieces upon it. However, I think it's misleading to imagine the game board between Beatrice and Battler as existing on a single layer. Held here on the first level is what I call the asymmetry of information theory. For a number of reasons we'll explore later, it is extremely unlikely for there to be just a single culprit of the murders. Let me clarify. Culprit here does not mean murderer. Culprit is used as a catch-all for not only the murderers, but also whoever helped facilitate the murders themselves. Whether they helped move corpses or simply told a convenient lie to help the murderer get away with their crime, they will all be considered culprits. With this definition in mind, I propose that all pieces across the game board operated on different levels of knowledge, with some even possibly advancing to higher layers as the murders took place. Layer 1 is for those who did not know anything about what was taking place. Layer 2 is for those who held a secret from the rest of the family that made them look suspicious, but had nothing to do with the murders themselves. Layer 3 is for those who had partial knowledge of the murders, and Layer 4 is for the masterminds who orchestrated the events. Anyone who touches Layer 3 or 4 during the course of the murders is considered a culprit, though I believe the division between Layer 3 and 4 is still an important distinction to make. Considering everyone, or nearly everyone, dies by the end of both episodes, those on Layer 3 were likely lured under the false pretense they would survive past the end, while those on Layer 4 were fully aware of the endgame. We'll examine this closer later. For now, we need to move on to Level 2. By the start of episode 2, we are led to believe that Beatrice and Battler are in a chess match, with Beatrice advancing her pieces and Battler advancing his in return in a grand exhibition of magical versus non-magical deduction. But if you'll remember our third truth, Beatrice is in control of the narrative in episode 1 and episode 2. As far as we can tell, the only piece Battler controls is himself, as Beatrice maneuvers the other more than 16 less than 17 pieces around him in order to tell a story Battler alone is in charge of disputing. That means the scene above board looks less like this and more like this. Recall our second truth. Those who are dead are dead. The purpose of the game board is only to explain in detail the series of events on Rokkenjima Island between October 4th and 5th, 1986. If Beatrice's goal was to kill everyone on the island, she would have won by virtue of their deaths alone. If Beatrice's goal was to have Battler believe in magic, she would have won by the end of episode 2, where Battler fully gives up. But she kept playing, meaning she must have other win conditions. What Beatrice and Battler disagree on is not necessarily the series of events themselves, which Battler can't seem to influence much, nor the results of the events, which have ended with mass deaths both times, but proving whether or not magic exists through the framework of a series of events under her control. Beatrice is drawing ley lines Battler stubbornly refuses to follow. Beatrice is trying to tell him a story. The framework of the adventure being a story in and of itself isn't a massive revelation. The episode 1 postscript says the witch made a point of leaving behind this tale, which had no need to be told, and permitted it to be spread. It then describes a wine bottle being found in the ocean a few years later, containing notebook pages telling this tale, which went on to spread as urban legend due to a largely inconclusive police investigation. Then, of course, comes the ominous claim, while the notebook pages tell of this mysterious incident, they do not tell of the truth behind it. The notebook pages are signed by Maria, along with a message begging for the truth to be uncovered. Maria's love for the occult and belief in Beatrice was unwavering in both episodes. She drew witches and studied magic in her spare time. It could even be claimed she wrote the death entries found in the character menu, as they praise the witch's actions, refer to the witch in both the second and third person, and contain the transcription of Maria's unique laughter. So, could Maria have gotten in too deep with Beatrice, only for her to regret it far too late? I don't believe so. Remember, Beatrice is in control of the narrative in episode 1 and episode 2. Beatrice is in control of all the pieces except Battler, and game masters are no strangers to playing the roles of NPCs from across the tabletop. The notebook pages are being written as Maria, not by Maria. I think Beatrice is speaking through her. Please uncover the truth. That is my only wish. This is not the first time Beatrice has spoken through other characters, either. By the end of episode 2, Battler had given up and accepted the existence of both magic and Beatrice. In the tea party that followed, Rosa was instead shown to be the holdout, preventing Beatrice's magic from activating. Beatrice proceeded to force-feed her a banquet made from various body parts of her own family members, before Battler rediscovered his resolve and sprang back into the narrative to make her stop. However, during the episode 2 Witches' Tea Party, Battler is told by Lambda Delta that Beatrice was putting on a show in order to inspire him back from the depths of his despair. In other words, the tea party was staged to get Battler fighting again. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to conclude the episode 1 tea party was also staged for a similar reason. Meaning Beatrice was speaking to Battler through everyone there, debating his logic in order to keep him thinking. Meaning Jessica's desperate standalone plea for Battler to not give in to the witch was actually being said by the witch herself. Are you still with me? Don't give up yet. We haven't even gotten to Schrodinger's gun. Partway through episode 1, Natsuhi retrieves a gun from Kinzo's study to arm herself during ongoing suspicions of which survivor is the murderer. We hear it fire once near the end of the episode. Partway through episode 2, Rosa retrieves a gun from Kinzo's study to arm herself during ongoing suspicions of which survivor is the murderer. We see it fire repeatedly near the end of the episode. Depending on how events unfold, Natsuhi and Rosa both have the potential of retrieving the gun from Kinzo's study and firing it before the end of the episode. but someone will always retrieve the gun, and the gun will always be fired. Level 3 is quantum observation, Schrodinger's gun. Because no one knows what happened on the island, anything could have happened on the island. All possibilities on Rokkenjima exist simultaneously until they are observed. Level 3 is the highest narrative level I've been able to discern so far. Beatrice, Bernkastel, and Lambda Delta can be found here, along with any other furniture. Battler does not yet seem to understand the importance of the fact he exists on this level. In a previous adventure of mine, the protagonist was tasked with repeating the same 22-minute loop millions of times over in an effort to find the specific trajectory needed to save the universe. It's tempting to linger in this moment while every possibility still exists, but unless they are collapsed by an observer, they will never be more than possibilities. In the end, it is his gaze, the gaze of a conscious observer, that secures a new path forward. By virtue of engaging in this game with him, Beatrice has given Battler the power of the observer to witness and canonize a series of events leading to the mass murders. On level 3, Bernkastel mentions crossing the fragments when traversing into Beatrice's territory, after which Beatrice says she's honored to have her as an observer. Later on, Beatrice says, your fates are nothing more than fragments, while antagonizing Shannon and Kanan. Fragments may be the equivalent of variant timelines, different cat boxes, possibilities witches are able to peek into from level 3. There's a few thematic ties between witches and television in this way. Maria is an aspiring witch, and her love of watching TV is brought up several times. Bernkastel says that trying to help us feels like trying to reach characters through a screen, and that's how you can tell she's a witch. Kanan has an odd one-off mention about something he's never experienced in reality being on the other side of the brawn tubes. Some of the transitions between chapters is a glass screen shattering. I get the sense witches may be able to see all possibilities, but are powerless to truly observe them, to canonize them, to collapse them into a single reality. They can only influence other pieces on the board into doing so. So, what is Beatrice trying to get Battler to observe? As we concluded earlier, Beatrice's win condition must be more than just mass murder, or having Battler believe in magic. She had already triumphed in both regards by the end of episode 2. Battler acquiesced, he was turned into furniture, he was stripped naked and placed on a leash and killed over and over again as a mindless plaything. But her win condition was not satisfied. Many aspects of this mystery have lingered in my mind, so much so that I feel the melody of its heartbeat and the tempos of other pulses. She is everywhere for those willing to see her. I was on another adventure recently. Funny enough, this one also featured the meta-narrative of an author dealing with a reader who sometimes refused to follow the adventure lines of his story, for better or for worse. In their realm, they are the only two consciousnesses featured in existence. In the following scene, the narrator has been left alone, isolated and away from the protagonist, for a very long time. I'm realizing that I needed to know that someone was listening. I needed there to be a vessel through which my words were moving. Not the outcomes, not the story, none of that matters anymore. I'll give it all up, I'll give up every branching path, I'll burn my story to the ground. One single thing I need, and God, I can see now that I need it more than anything, is to know that someone else is taking it in. If you can hear me, then maybe it means I'm real. Maybe I'm not just a fiction. Was I scared of that all along? Perhaps, yes. Perhaps I've been scared this whole time that if I stop speaking, I'll slip backwards into the silence and be consumed by it. I can't lose myself in the stretch of emptiness between you and me. In those moments, the emptiness folds itself outward in between the two of us, and I am suspended in its unyielding quietness. I can feel the edges of my reality curdling inward and decaying. I can tell that I am becoming less and less real. Yet to speak to you now, I am alive. I am truly and completely here. I am a being. I am someone. I am something. I am being listened to. I am being recognized. The emptiness between us has collapsed, and I feel right now like I am not a work of fiction. I feel as though I occupy space in this world again, and I have cast a shadow onto the wall. My heart ached for the narrator. My heart ached for her. While antagonizing Kanan over breaking Jessica's heart, Beatrice says, nothing saddens me more than being forgotten. While speaking through the ghosts of Kanan and Jessica, pushing Battler to think harder about how he can clear Kanan's name from the accusations of being Jessica's murderer, Beatrice chides, "The laments of the dead never reach the living." She's dead. She exists. She's dead. She exists. Why can't you see her? Beatrice herself is quantum in nature. She exists between the pages, a version no one's heard before, a version she could only reveal while pretending to be someone else, a version she allowed to float in a wine bottle cast into the ocean years ago, because she only exists as long as someone is looking at her. She is not real, not yet, not so long as the message within her story is not received. But Beatrice doesn't just need Battler to see her, she needs him to observe her and what happened to her in her birdcage, in her sliced-off part of the sea, so that the quantum flux of her and her story might finally collapse into reality. Beatrice is a quantum sate who wishes to be canonized under the baptism of Battler's gaze, and she loathes the amount of power he has over her. And she loathes the fact he doesn't even realize it, and she loathes that he is so willing to throw it all away. But what's the non-magic explanation for Battler's struggle with Beatrice? If you believe this to be a dispute between a game master and a player, between an author and a reader, the leap away from the magic explanation isn't too complex. In fact, it's pretty simple. Battler is a lone survivor of the massacre, likely living with Anji. He knows the truth about the murders, but either has amnesia or has repressed the horrors so much his subconscious has locked away what's happened in order to protect his psyche. The notebook pages surface years later, and they trigger his memories because they contain details only someone who was present would know. This would explain why he has no power to change the outcome of the murders. Purgatory is just post-amnesiac Battler poring over notebook pages somewhere in Anji's spare bedroom, struggling to come to terms with the truth of what occurred. I want to take a brief aside here to talk about the 18th versus 19th person and how that can potentially relate to Beatrice. Near the beginning of the story, we're told that Rokkenjima is located in an archipelago called the Izu 7. People believe there's only 7 islands, but there's actually more, and Rokkenjima is one of the islands that don't get counted. The theme of having another person inside of oneself comes up quite a lot. Nanjo says 2 Kinzos existed, one wise and one trapped by madness, and throughout their entire friendship, Nanjo only ever got to know half of the man. One moment, Maria is still sounding out words as she reads. The next, she reads through Beatrice's letter without missing a beat. Multiple comments are made about seeing someone else behind her eyes. Jessica talks about creating another version of herself, splitting the person she is at home and the person she is at school, and encourages Kanon to do the same, to create another self to fulfill his true desires, one where he can consider himself human and not furniture. In early episode 3, Ava is shown to have her younger self as a distinct personality inside of her, who she hears and speaks to regularly. Shannon speaks of being torn between the virtuous part of herself and the part that sides with the witch. Having conversations with Beatrice inside of her head is even part of Shannon's daily routine. Many of these could be metaphorical, of course, but I feel as though it's happened too many times to be a complete coincidence, and I've spoken of other patterns with far less occurrences. An alter would allow for a 19th person to both exist and not exist. I do think becoming a witch means gaining an alter in some form. I think Kinzo may have been missing something, perhaps his inability to recognize the single element of the world that would have allowed him to divide cleanly and become a witch, and instead his spirit became tangled within the webs of his own obsessive madness. I hope we see Maria and young Ava become witches, as I believe their altars have the strongest presence in the text from what we've seen so far. I hope somehow we can see Battler become a witch, as he's already operating on level 3 and might already be an alter himself without realizing it. Having him deny his own existence would be funny, I think. Above all, I do think Beatrice is an alter of someone on Rokkenjima. Kanon and Shannon's existences are heavily tied to one another. Kumasawa mentions that Kinzo's trifling whim led to Natsuhi rejecting Shannon and Kanon's existences, which, when considering Natsuhi's self-worth being tied to birthing an heir to the family, makes me think the two of them may be products of affairs, and that Kinzo's orphanage may just be a place where he can put them all. They are both counterparts and foils in many, many ways, most obviously in how their love is explored. Shannon curses herself for being born with a heart, and in both episodes chooses to love George and refuses to regret it, even after learning it will end in despair. Meanwhile, Kanon commits strongly to his dehumanizing self-loathing and self-perception as furniture, fervently denying himself the feelings he has for Jessica until it's far too late. Shannon always sees the ocean as blue. Kanon believes he can only see gray. You know, it's funny. When we first met Kanon, I actually thought Shannon was just cross-dressing. The identical eye colors, their separate introductions, their similar names, at least before we learned of the naming conventions at Kinzo's orphanage. I drifted away from the theory for a while because they'd been seen together in multiple places and have spoken separately to different people at the same time. But, now knowing the reliability of scenes can be called into question based on who's observing it, if scenes can't be trusted because Battler's piece wasn't there to observe it, or because the scene itself was populated by culprits, like wolves outnumbering sheep, who corroborated and agreed upon a lie we saw as the truth. Buried within those potential misdirects, I can see the possibility of Shannon and Kanon being plural. As far as I can tell, Battler himself has never seen and spoken to them in the same place. But I've decided to hold on to that theory until further evidence supports it. It requires one too many leaps in logic I'm not confident making just yet. For now, I will utilize a related but lesser theory of mine as a framework, one I have more confidence in. Assuming Beatrice is an alter, and assuming she is quantum in nature, I think Beatrice is a form of Schrödinger's gun onto herself, and I believe that either Shannon or Kanon are always destined to manifest her. You would think the magic explanation for murders would be easy. Everything Beatrice said happened. The end. But I'd like to think there's a little more to it than that. If we push the Schrödinger's box metaphor a little harder, I think we can suspect the possibility of Kinzo already being dead in the non-magic explanation, but alive in the magic explanation, making him both dead and alive at the same time. There are countless instances of the text mentioning that Rokkenjima has been cut off from the world and cut off from reality itself. Ava and Kyrie all but look directly at the camera and say, "We're trapped in a world of fiction right now, so don't believe anything you see on the island." One of the biggest tells came after early episode 3, when Kordorian was introduced. Because, earlier, we are told by the third-person narrator that the Ushiromiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokkenjima. Even under the guidance of our truth that Beatrice is in control of the narrative in episode 1 and episode 2, this could have a few explanations. Either 1. Genji, Kanon, or Natsuhi do not know about Kordorian. 2. Genji, Kanon, Natsuhi deny Kordorian's presence, pretending it doesn't exist. 3. Beatrice wants us or Battler to think Genji, Kanon, Natsuhi do not know about Kordorian. Or 4. Beatrice does not want us or Battler to know Kordorian exists at all. Regardless of the motivation behind it, we can conclude our narrator is unreliable, meaning even the scenes we witness might not have transpired exactly as shown. This opens up a whole other world of possibilities I am actively choosing not to embark upon too far upon this early in the story, lest this presentation on the first 2 episodes never be completed. Instead, we're mostly going to apply this theory to Kinzo, and that anyone who speaks to or claims to have spoken to Kinzo is automatically suspect. Upon waking up alive after the first twilight, Kinzo says, I will not shame myself like last time, a clear indicator that he remembers the events of the previous episode. I believe that in magical scenario Kinzo knows he is dead in the non-magical scenario, and that the ritual was a deliberate play to maximize his chances of seeing Beatrice. He was aware the ritual would turn Rokkenjima into Schrödinger's island, as it would force the area under the witch's gaze and open up fragments of possibilities, other episodes, where he could remain alive until he saw her again, brute forcing at least one fragment where he was not chosen by the roulette. Kinzo did not care about being torn apart and dragged to hell at the end of episode 2, because he'd found the fragment in which his plan succeeded. He'd won. I also propose that, to facilitate this, Kinzo's study is in and of itself a second, smaller Schrödinger's box, preventing him from being seen by witches on level 3, and keeping him alive. This is why he refuses to let himself be seen by anyone but his own furniture, because he is both dead and alive in the box, until he is observed. Somehow he was lured out in episode 1. Likely a skill issue. Now, let's examine the episode 1 murders from a non-magic point of view. As mentioned at the beginning, the only red truths I dared ask from the council were those that contradicted one of my conclusions due to an objective misunderstanding or oversight on my part. For example, if a theory of mine hinged on the premise that Battler ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but he actually mentioned he was deathly allergic to peanuts back in episode 1, the council would reply something like, "Battler is allergic to peanuts." That means I've overlooked something I should have noticed before, and my theory may be rendered invalid. A valid theory does not mean a correct theory, it just means I got all my facts straight. So, when I proposed an outline of my non-magical explanation for the episode 1 murders, valid as presented, my heart just about stopped. I hope to not disappoint. The pieces on layer 1, those with no knowledge of events, are as follows. Kyrie, Rosa, George, Jessica, and Goda as pawns. And of course, Battler as the observer. The pieces on layer 2, those carrying a secret unrelated to the murders, are as follows. Rudolph and Kumasawa, who are pawns, Natsuhi and Kraus, who are rooks, uniquely able to castle/hide the king. The pieces on layer 3, culprits who assisted with the murders in some way, are as follows. Nanjo, bishop, closest to the king, Eva and Hideyoshi, knights, who are hired mercenaries. The pieces on layer 4, the masterminds, are as follows. Kinzo, king, exists? Beatrice, queen, exists? Genji, bishop, closest to the king. Shannon, Kanon, and Maria, pawns that can ascend into the queen upon crossing the board. Maria's letter and the umbrella were delivered to Maria in the rose garden by either Shannon or Kanon wearing Beatrice's dress. Natsuhi suspects Kinzo dressed Shannon in Beatrice's clothing to deliver the letter. Eva echoes the suspicions of Shannon dressing in Beatrice's clothing in order to trick Maria. Natsuhi keeping secrets about Kinzo, and Eva trying to draw suspicion away from herself, both arrived at the same conclusion as a distraction that came close to the truth of what actually happened. However, I think it goes a bit deeper. I believe Maria, as a budding witch, would be able to recognize Beatrice fronting an alter, switching into having control of the body. A disguise might not have necessarily been needed. That night, Rudolph wants to have a meeting with his immediate family members, saying he'll probably be killed. Rosa put forth a wild accusation that Battler might not actually be Battler, and it's the only thing I can tie back to what Rudolph wanted to talk about. Otherwise, we don't know too much about his life outside of the office, so I'm not sure what else it might be regarding. But I have no reason to believe it was related to his upcoming death. Rudolph is suspected of harboring some sort of secret from his family, but is not considered a culprit. In the case of the first Twilight, the only corpses Battler, the observer, clearly identified himself were those of his parents. Every other corpse has the potential to be faked or otherwise unreliable. Nanjo providing false medical testimony would contribute to this and place him as a culprit. The mutilated faces of the corpses suggest the actual cause of death was deliberately obscured. I suspect a lower caliber firearm from Kinzo's collection, with reasoning to follow. Shannon and Krause's death entries on the main menu were phrased slightly differently from the rest of the bodies. It seems that the side of his or her head was smashed versus his or her face was smashed. Their faces could have been more intact than was indicated by assumption. In addition, Shannon had a narrative line wistfully hinting at the possibility of wiping off her makeup to see the remainder of her smile. Krause shuffled the servants' schedules around last minute as a form of protection, which would have been counterintuitive for the involvement of any servants except Goda. Suspecting Kinzo's servants as culprits, which this theory does, lowers Krause's suspicion in return. Due to the markings on Natsuhi's doorknob, Natsuhi was likely targeted to be one of the deaths of the first Twilight. However, the scorpion charm Jessica gave to her, which she subsequently hung over her doorknob, meant she would have to be skipped in order to preserve the myth of the Golden Witch. This means another body would have had to take her place last minute, which I believe to be one of the culprits. Genji, Kanon, Eva, and Hideyoshi were alone together at the storehouse for an extended period of time before fetching Nanjo and Natsuhi from the mansion. The sigil could have been painted upon the shutters at any time, and the integrity of the shutter lock is negated by the presence of multiple servants with access to the key. Hideyoshi is very insistent on blaming the supernatural at both the storehouse and following it, a superstitious attitude we don't see replicated so strongly in later characterizations. Eva, similarly, acts somewhat strange in how quickly she tries to convince Battler of her innocence while casting suspicion elsewhere. Shannon, Kanon, Genji, Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo are the prime suspected culprits of the first Twilight. In the case of the second twilight, Genji and Kanon were the ones to discover the chain lock at the door. The chain lock had only been observed by others after it had already been cut with Kanon's bolt cutters, calling the integrity of the lock into question. Genji and Kanon could have committed the murders at any time before chaining the lock and then cutting it. Genji and Kanon were the only ones to see the door before the sigil was painted on it. A more tongue-in-cheek note, but Battler swears to, quote, grip the killer by the collar before the end of the night. Battler gripped Kanon by the collar in just the previous scene when discussing details about Beatrice's legend with the other servants in the kitchen. Kanon and Genji are the prime suspected culprits of the second twilight. In the case of the receipt seal, the easiest explanation possible is that Natsuhi lied about seeing Kinzo. Gold has strong thematic ties to the truth. Krauss taking Natsuhi to see the singular gold bar retrieved from his investigation could serve as a metaphor for him trusting Natsuhi with the truth of Kinzo having already died. This metaphor could extend to Genji as well, who handed Natsuhi a golden key to go visit Kinzo on her own. The constantly described sweet, sickening, chemical, headache-inducing stench from Kinzo's room could be formaldehyde or other embalming fluids to keep his body intact. Natsuhi may have fabricated one last wish-fulfillment conversation with Kinzo's body to bolster her own confidence in how she carries herself around the rest of the family after having her pride cut down multiple times earlier during the conference. Natsuhi and Krauss are suspected of lying about Kinzo's death, but are not considered culprits if Kinzo died at some point before the start of the conference. In the case of the fourth twilight, Kinzo already being dead means the incineration of the corpse was another method of disguising the original cause, and potentially time, of death. The person responsible for burning his body may not be responsible for his death. However, it is worth noting that the boiler room has an entrance out into the courtyard. A culprit shoving Kinzo's body out from his study window is an option for transportation. In the case of the fifth twilight, Kanon being killed was not observed by a trusted party, so the integrity of the scene is in question. Kumasawa only came in on the aftermath. Due to her multiple pseudo-Greek chorus scenes where she leans against the fourth wall and speaks directly to the narrative, I suspect Kumasawa of harboring many secrets on behalf of the Ushiramiya family, but I'm not sure I can picture the old part-timer having the constitution to cover up a murder. It'd be easier to fool her than to convince her to participate. Therefore, she is not considered a culprit in this theory. However, the theory about Kanon faking his death only holds water if both Genji and Nanjo are culprits themselves, due to the handling of Kanon's body afterwards, and the fact no one else checks on Kanon's body after he dies. Genji, Nanjo, and Kanon are the prime suspected culprits of the fifth twilight. Genji and Maria and/or Nanjo being culprits would also explain the letter that appears on the table in Kinzo's study with the remainder of survivors. As it involves sleight of hand, I suspect Genji more readily after seeing his blade work in the following episode. In the case of the 6th, 7th, and 8th twilights, they are most easily explained if Shannon and/or Kanon were culprits, and Shannon and/or Kanon's deaths were faked. Whoever it was the same person who approached Maria with the umbrella, as Maria recognized Beatrice from before. Like before, Genji, Kumasawa, and Nanjo's faces may have been destroyed to hide their true cause of death. The amount of blood in the room makes the use of heavy gunfire here more plausible, however. In the case of the 9th twilight, assuming the sound effects were accurate, only one shot was heard from the parlor as Battler broke down the candlestick-locked door. Natsuhi was holding a smoking rifle when she was found, and it was considered a suicide, but the wound in her forehead does not match the caliber of the gun she was holding. That is to say, a point-blank shot from a rifle would have caused much more damage, as possibly seen from the murders in the parlor. This, retroactively, makes me believe the primary murder weapons across Twilights were at least 2 guns, one of a larger caliber and one of a smaller caliber, the latter of which was drowned out by the firing of Natsuhi's rifle. Although this puts Kinzo's potential gun collection to at least 3 models, I don't believe it to be beyond the realm of possibility for Kinzo, a wealthy gun enthusiast, to smuggle in more than a single firearm from overseas. The biggest flaw of this theory is that 6 shots ringing out in the dining hall during the first Twilight must have been heard by those in the mansion at the time, such as Goda and Kumasawa. However, the 6 could have been killed in a more silent way in the dining hall, covered up post-mortem with a facial mutilation. All theories require the assistance of Shannon, Genji, and Kanon at minimum. Kinzo wouldn't have to be alive to have set up a scorched earth scenario for his ritual. It could have even been carried out as a last will and testament by his servants, which is why he didn't care to leave any other form of will behind. Alternatively, Shannon or Kanon may have received Beatrice as an altar, becoming the primary culprit for carrying out the Twilights. Genji was ordered to treat Beatrice on the same level of importance as Kinzo, so knowing of Beatrice's true identity, he followed their lead in loyalty. Alternatively still, Shannon and/or Kanon could be Kinzo's secret offspring, left to be raised by his orphanage, who later learned the true depths of his depravities. They could have followed the epitaph in vengeful irony, taking Beatrice's promised interest by killing his entire family. And if they were offspring, their own lives would be included. However, unless there were deeply personal grievances we are not aware of, I can see no motivation for such a violent, strategic mass murder of the entire bloodline, rather than making Kinzo suffer while he was alive, assuming, of course, he was dead by the time the Twilights began. If he wasn't dead by the time the Twilight started, I suppose being drugged, thrown out a third-story window, and burned alive is as good a punishment as any. Once more onto the breach. Another proposal to the council, this time a brief outline of my non-magical explanation for the episode 2 murders. Ballot is presented. The old boys still got it. Remember, a valid theory does not mean a correct theory. I was much less certain about my outline for episode 2, so the bump in confidence was much appreciated. Let's begin. Pieces on Layer 1, those with no knowledge of events, are as follows. Kyrie, George, Jessica, Ava, and Hideyoshi as pawns. And once again Battler as the observer. The pieces on Layer 2, those carrying a secret unrelated to the murders, are as follows. Rudolph and Kumasawa as pawns, Natsuhi and Kraus as rooks, uniquely able to castle/hide the king. The pieces on Layer 3, culprits who assisted with the murders in some way, are as follows. Nanjo, bishop closest to the king, Rosa and Goda, knights who are hired mercenaries. The pieces on Layer 4, the masterminds, are as follows. Kinzo, king, exists. Beatrice, queen, exists. Genji, bishop closest to the king. Shannon, Kanon, and Maria, pawns who can ascend into a queen upon crossing the board. Beatrice in the Rose Garden once again could be explained as Shannon or Kanon wearing Beatrice's outfit. Shannon has bought Kanon stylish clothes before, so we know she has a sense of fashion. However, Kanon would have been holding one of the Halloween candies Maria gave out upon arrival on the island, as Shannon wasn't there. Kanon would have been slightly better positioned for a sleight of hand trick to revive Maria's destroyed candy. This time, I'm more inclined to believe a physical disguise was involved, due to Beatrice being able to fool the adults one at a time. Kyrie was exceedingly cautious, however, and only acquiesced after the other adults. She likely didn't buy the disguise completely. In the case of the first Twilight, because everyone present was in need of money and saw Beatrice as a threat to their inheritance, Beatrice could have easily gathered the adults into the chapel and convinced them of her identity based on the additional knowledge she had about Kinzo and his gold. However, I don't think the adults would have agreed to a roulette so easily. The table in the chapel wasn't supposed to be there, so they could have been convinced it was a secret negotiation held in Kinzo's sacred place. That would explain the used tea set in the dining room, and the note that was left there. The adults moved to the chapel for further discussion, and were taken out while already seated around the table. Their faces were undamaged, but I still believe the staging, being slit from stomach to throat, is meant to hide the true cause of death, as before. Corrosive acid, which would cause vomiting and disfigurement from the chin down, or some other type of poisoning is the easiest explanation that comes to mind. Gunshot wounds to the chest are possible, but lack of damage to the chairs, along with not simply aiming for the head and repeating the post-mortem disfigurement, as seen in episode 1, makes it less likely. For Maria's letter and the chapel key, little explanation needs to be given, assuming Rosa was a culprit. Swapping out envelopes from Maria's bag, or sneaking the envelope key out and resealing the letter are both possible. Lying about the chapel being locked in the first place is also possible, as only suspected culprits were present at the time of the door unlocking. Rosa is the most obvious suspect due to not mentioning being at the Devil's Sacrament in the chapel during the entire course of the murders and subsequent investigation, and the constant, aggressive projection of blame on others throughout to avoid being suspected herself. Rosa being the sole survivor watching a horrific feast involving her family members in the episode 2 tea party could be a nod to her being the traitor in the chapel scene as well. We know how much she needed the money and hated her siblings, so she was likely promised gold in return. In the case of the second Twilight, Kanon was killed, but his corpse is absent. His master key is on Jessica's person. Genji and Shannon are the only ones in possession of master keys who would have had enough time to murder them and lock the doors from the outside upon leaving. In addition, they both had an alibi of speaking with Kinzo, who may or may not be dead, and if he isn't, he may have covered for them with the writing a will out of nowhere after vehemently refusing one this entire time scene. I can see Genji killing Kanon and Jessica, but the absence of Kanon's corpse is exceedingly suspicious, because leaving it there would have made the most sense to fulfill the second Twilight. Genji has no motivation to have moved Kanon's body. The only other explanation I can think of is that Kanon's body wasn't actually dead. Kanon, as an identity, was killed. He either carries Beatrice as an alter, or became Beatrice from that moment forward. He either carries Beatrice as an alter and became Beatrice from that moment forward, or Kanon and Shannon really are the same person, and only Shannon was left. This would put her in possession of two master keys, and explain why Kanon's corpse isn't there. Even then, I have a really hard time imagining Kanon killing Jessica. It could be considered a finality in that, as Shannon's foil, he closed off that possibility with Jessica, while Shannon and George still had futures at the time. Kanon and/or Shannon are the primary suspects of the second Twilight. In the case of Kanon in the 7th and 8th Twilights, we have unreliable narrators aplenty. Goda can't seem to spit a story out when asked, so it's up to Genji to cover for him with short, vague explanations. Kanon fully embodying Beatrice could explain Goda's bewilderment at Kanon's behavior and how the corpses disappeared in the survivor's absence. However, I think it would be impossible for someone with Kanon's frame to move Kumasawa and Nanjo out entirely by themselves, especially since Kanon was depicted struggling with physical tasks when we first met him. I imagine the servants helped hide the bodies of Nanjo and Kumasawa before reporting them dead. I can also see Genji, possibly together with Beatrice as Kanon and/or Shannon, being the murderers of Nanjo and Kumasawa. With the bodies gone as soon as reliable witnesses came to investigate, this does flag the possibility of Nanjo and/or Kumasawa as a culprit faking their death between now and later. More plausibly, the murderer wanted to move them elsewhere to be discovered with the right timing to fulfill the epitaph. Kanon, Shannon, Goda, and Genji are the primary suspects of the 7th and 8th Twilights. In the case of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Twilights, all 5 master keys are accounted for, and Natsuhi's room key is with George, who is dead inside the locked room. In my opinion, Shannon's body positioning is extremely suspect upon discovery. It would be bizarre to have died from a skull injury with a stake that deeply embedded, but having it fall out in such a loose manner afterwards. If it wasn't for the keys, I would have blamed this one on Genji as well, but someone inside the room must have killed the other two and either faked their death or went on to kill themselves. Shannon's wound is one of the most grievous confirmations we've received so far, so I don't think she's faking this time. On the other hand, I really can't see George or Goda faking their own deaths or having the stomach to pull off such a horrific scene. In retrospect, Natsuhi's room was also clearly a nefarious setup via Genji, Goda, and Shannon to isolate George, using the mirror as bait. If George had to die, I can see Shannon killing herself over having nothing left to live for. The only glaring weak point of this theory is how Shannon committed murder-suicide with no visible weapon in the room other than the stake. As prior, I believe a gun is the most likely murder weapon, but I admittedly cannot explain its absence in this scene. Still, Goda and Shannon are the primary suspects of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Twilights. In the case of Nanjo and Kumasawa's corpses, Genji found their bodies much later in the evening out in the courtyard, which you can only access from inside the mansion. I believe he almost definitely had something to do with helping move or hide the bodies to find them in timing with the epitaph, potentially with the assistance or under the order of Shannon or Beatrice as Kanon. I will admit, discussing the Golden Land Party from a non-magical angle is not an exercise of imagination I am prepared for. At this moment, I'm not entirely clear on the potential symbolism to help me map out a possible explanation, aside from Battler surrendering to the concept of magic and losing himself completely in his denial. Burn Castello and Lambda Delta make appearances, Battler actually observes Beatrice and Kinzo in person for the first time, Rosa fights to the death to protect her daughter, and Maria says that there is no more than one of herself, only different facets of the same person. There must be some significance there. If anything, I do like the image of either Genji or Beatrice as Kanon, in the rain, hunting Rose and Maria down across the island as the two of them try to escape. Interestingly, the limitations and predictions of this theory are the same as the last. All theories require the assistance of Shannon, Genji, and Kanon at minimum. Although this theory has different culprits, it retains the same masterminds. I cannot decide if this is a strike for or against its feasibility. The theories of Kinzo's last will and testament being executed by his servants, Shannon or Kanon, more likely Kanon, receiving Beatrice as an altar, or Shannon and or Kanon as not so long lost kin of Kinzo, burning everything to the ground in a bout of righteous fury, are still possibilities here as well. The warning mentioned in the preview was correct. Episode 2 was much more difficult than the first, in my opinion. I feel as though I'm catching lingering traces of true intent, but like smoke between my fingers, I can't get grasp onto anything solid. Servants are assisting with murders and roping Ushiromiya family members in to assist with the deception, but why? Is it so important to keep Beatrice's magic alive on this island? Is Beatrice herself merely an allegory for the amalgamation of all of Kinzo's worst secrets? Why are Genji, Kanon, and Shannon this committed to carrying out the scenarios? What is the Golden Land, and why are they, especially Kanon, so transfixed with going there? What about it are they so convinced will make them human? What is being human? Being furniture? Is it moving from being the play's set dressing to becoming one of its actors, or one of its writers? Why is it, even in the hyper-fantasy magic ending, Maria still died in such a terrifying way, and was not led gently to the Golden Land in spite of her unwavering loyalty to the witch? Doesn't Beatrice keep her promises? There are so many questions that have yet to be answered. I must continue traveling down the ley lines. Almost at the end now. How exciting. I have an early theory about the epitaph, involving a mixture of factoids about Kinzo and a couple of extremely basic kanji I remember back from university. I was told that the epitaph requires some knowledge of kanji to be able to solve it, so I asked for a transcription of the epitaph in its original Japanese. The first lines of the epitaph are, "Behold the sweet fish river, running through my beloved home of old. You who seek the Golden Land, follow its path downstream in search of the key." When trying to solve it themselves, the cousins first reasoned that Odawara may be Kinzo's hometown, as the Ushiromiya family had a mansion there before the war. However, according to Shannon and George's conclusions, and Battler's earlier retelling, Kinzo being part of a branch family meant he was heavily distanced from the main family, which makes it more likely he lived nowhere near the Odawara mansion, let alone when it was destroyed in 1923. The reason Kinzo was even chosen as the next family head was because everyone else in the main family had been lost. That is to say, the Odawara mansion was probably not Kinzo's beloved home of old. If the epitaph is indeed a riddle, I imagine two ways this first line can be read. The first is that the river itself no longer exists. Knowledge of its location and its existence could only be obtained if you were close to Kinzo, or you knew where to find stories of his youth. Even then, you'd also need an older map of the area. Ironically, this could be Kinzo asking people to learn more about him in a desire to be seen. The other explanation is that the Sweetfish River running through my home is a metaphor for something else. The second line of the epitaph asks us to follow its path downstream. The kanji used for downstream here is orite. Kudari and nobori are used to denote outbound and inbound trains, especially in relation to whether it's coming from or going to Tokyo. My supporting evidence is based on the next two lines. As you travel down it, you will see a village. In the village, look for the shore the two speak of. Don't worry, I can't really read most of that, but I can see it uses the kanji for kuchi in the part about the two people speaking, which is also used to denote entrance and exit as labels for gates and stations. Therefore, my guess is that the Sweetfish River running through my beloved home of old is referring to a train line that currently runs or used to run through Kinzo's real hometown. It may be southbound from Tokyo or somewhere much further south of Tokyo. There also might be a special station at which you're meant to disembark that has two people speaking at the exit, which in itself could be a metaphor for something like where the train line itself converges from two different directions. Maybe the name of the station or the city it's in is some kind of pun. Maybe there's some other wordplay or kanji hints involving the shore. This is probably as far as I'm getting without further hints, though. Before we go, I just have one more adventure I'd like to tell you about. One that really helped me think about where Battler's story might be going. Divide. There was once a divide between the two. It was life, it was death, it was a bout of rain. Those who came after questioned the true nature of the divide. It was bloodline, it was reason, it was a flash of insight. A brave soul leaps across and turns to look back at the divide. He sees a door never meant to be opened, in an imaginary wall. Adler, codename Enigma, is a cryptographer and theoretical physicist who once saw the universe as a puzzle to be solved. Then, the first of several timeline-reversing catastrophes, collectively known as the Storm, upended the laws of nature, rendering Adler's rationalist philosophy, his lifelong field of study, and a millennia's worth of scientific research obsolete in an instant. The recent loss of his older sister, Greta Hoffmann, adds survivor's guilt and renewed grief to his ongoing existential crisis. Physics is dead, his only family is dead, and he finds himself disillusioned about his place in this strange new world. Greta was an arcane investigator who died on the field, researching solutions for the next storm. Though neither sibling held much fondness for magic, Greta dedicated her life to solving unique problems that arose within arcane society, reining in anomalous chaos with chains of bureaucratic logic for others in the future to follow. To Adler, however, magic was little more than an unwanted research variable, bureaucracy, nothing but managing the relentless tedium of wasted time. Years later, those feelings are only amplified when Adler finds himself as acting director of his arcane research facility. Though shoved into the role by circumstance, he's pressured to assume the mantle permanently, lest the larger, more militant organization they report to sees oversight. Deep down, Adler just wants to be a researcher again. He misses the thrill of curiosity back when the universe followed known rules and science could still make sense of it. But what's the point of scientific research when faced with continuous setbacks by the storm? Why bother suffering for impermanence? There's always been a door between Adler and the person he wanted to become. A door he watched Greta walk through time and time again. A door that hasn't opened for him since being sealed shut by the storm. At Adler's research facility, a mysterious arcane sandbox is under observation. It runs disaster protocol simulations using the memory data of various people, snapshots of consciousnesses from the past who live and act and reset with every simulated disaster within. A copy of Greta exists here too, one who does not recognize Adler. During one of his dives, he informs her of the nature of her existence, to not waste her time investigating her world as her progress will always reset and her efforts will be in vain. She thanks him for his warning and continues onward anyway. She wants to see the futility with her own eyes, and if she is to fail, perhaps she'll leave behind something for those who come after to follow. Just as stubborn as her real-world counterpart once was, relentless in her pursuit of tedium. When the sandbox destabilizes, Adler dives in to repair it with his colleagues watching on standby, and finds he is suddenly unable to reach the tower they'd built inside. He realizes the sandbox changes its environment in response to the number of observers. The more observers, the more unstable its environment becomes. Adler needs to not only isolate himself from his colleagues' field of view, but also abandon the mantle of observer altogether. In order to reach his destination, he needs to close his eyes. And when he finally arrives at the Tower of Babel, he is faced with a door. A door with no handle, no cracks in the wall, and no way forward. A door, he discovers, the simulated Greta permanently destroyed herself in order to pass through and reach the other side, and in doing so, left behind a clue for him who came after to follow. The enemy that facilitated the sandbox's destabilization is a simulated copy of another scientist, warding visitors away after the scientist's actual consciousness became trapped. His curiosity led him to behold what lay within the tower, and the truth tore his mind apart. The Raven claims that Adler's detached, overly analytic mind is the reason he will never truly comprehend the nature of magic, and why his mind would fare no better than all who have come before him. But through the scientist's digital afterimage, Adler sees himself. He sees his sister, his colleagues. Every single one of them would gladly see themselves destroyed to abate a curiosity that burned brightly enough, if it meant adding one new fragment of knowledge to the world that those who came after could follow. The sanctity of reckless idealism needed to be protected for the sake of innovation and of all mankind. They suffer not because the road is cruel, but because as scientists they choose to press on in spite of it. Such power should only be in the hands of people with the hubris to make sense of the world. And for a moment, Adler glimpses the world through his sister's eyes. Adler realizes he needs to abandon the person he wanted to become to make room for who his colleagues needed him to be. The door of who he once was is closed to him forever, but it is not the only way to the other side. When he looks up from the door, he realizes there is no wall around it. What lies beyond the tower brings a flicker of logic to the dark chaos of Adler's world. He feels a divine spark of curiosity ignite, and the universe becomes a puzzle again, waiting to be solved. The world as Adler knows it has changed. He's lost his loved ones to a disaster he can't explain, and deep down he just needs the world to make sense again. There is a door in front of him standing between him and the truth of the world, a door telling him that magic is real. He denies it, he fights it, he fires at it with volleys of arrows because the universe, his universe, needs to follow known rules, rules that his logic can make sense of. Adler suffers not because Beatrice is cruel, but because he chooses to press on in spite of it. Cloaked beneath layers of metaphor, Beatrice has left behind ley lines for those who come after her to follow, and all of them lead under the door. She watches Adler throw himself against it as it continues to give him no answers, waiting for him to realize that magic does not need to be denied in order to reach the other side. She needs him to see the world through her eyes before he returns his gaze to the door. When he does, he will see there are no walls around it. The arcane sandbox of Rokenjima uses snapshots of people from the past to run its disaster simulations, data in the shape of humans who have no idea they are without a future, and after their disaster will have their game board reset anew. The island is being observed by new witches. The higher the number of the observers, the more chaotic the environment within becomes, and the more difficult it will be for Adler to reach his destination. I think, in the future, Adler will need to pivot away from being a piece on the board altogether, away from being another observer, and will need to close his eyes to reach the superpositioned heart of Beatrice's story. Once he grasps that heart, he can take what he's learned back with him and use that newfound spark to pen a story of his own about what took place on that island, to merge their truths into something past mere acceptance, understanding. Because such power should only be in the hands of people with the hubris to make sense of the world. I think having Beatrice's story written by someone who finally looks at her with love would make her feel more real than anything. There was once a divide between the two. It was life. It was death. It was a bout of rain. Those who came after questioned the true nature of the divide. It was bloodline. It was reason. It was a flash of insight. A brave soul leaps across and turns to look back at the divide. He sees a door never meant to be opened, and an imaginary wall. Adler and Maria have identical crosses in their outfits. Maria, in love with magic, wears hers right side up. Adler, opposed to magic, wears his upside down. Once he learns the truth lies somewhere in between, I hope he stops wearing the cross. The scent of cardamom hangs in the air. Two figures, friends, sit lazily around a tea table, both reclined in elegantly but without pretense, comfortable in their conversation. The girl with ginger hair, curly like copper bronze, dangles a glass of thick and creamy orange liquid from her fingertips. She's gesturing with it as she speaks, and the ice clinks against itself and the cup.
Look, I'll tell you right now, this Ryukishi guy is one fake son of a bitch.
The other figure exhales out a laugh through his nose as he pulls his own glass, chalky erythritol lemonade, away from his lips, setting it down on a coaster. It doesn't take long for him to pick up on what she's doing, antenna twitching like animal ears.
I mean, broadly, he's a fucking hack.
I don't even think 7 is his real last name.
It's 6.
The ginger girl momentarily stops. An ache pangs her chest. 6, 7. Something about that doublet seemed funny. Not that she would know why.
If good artists take inspiration and great artists steal, then what would you classify any of this as?
Stories about stories, fiction within fiction, games within games. You know what this is, right? What this reminds you of? We both know.
Because when you put together all the variables, the guy obviously played Super Paper Mario before he wrote this scenario.
Exactly.
Maybe he like fiction jambalaya it. Like he just picked a bunch of tasty stuff from other yummy stuff and made it into his stuff.
Explain.
Like, how can I put this? It's like that part at the end of Saint Elsewhere, where it turns out the hospital was in the snow globe the whole time.
Oh, or that part in Control where you keep getting phone calls from a guy who you think is talking to you, but he's like fully dead and it's just an echo of his thoughts bouncing through the phone lines.
And it's also like that part from Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes, where you finally get to the guy who's been stuck in the game, only to find out the only place he'd really belong is the game.
Oh, or like Kamen Rider O's! I think Beatrice is a greed, and the goat dudes are like her yummies.
Or like in Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, where, well, you know. Shouldn't be said here. People are watching.
Or like that one terminal in Classic Marathon, where you find a weird story set in the current day about a prisoner watching another prisoner kill a rat. And the story doesn't make any sense, but it ends up being an abstract metaphor about escaping the heat death of the universe. But that's also a metaphor for escaping the narrative and becoming alive.
Or, like, all of Lost. I think you just really got a kick out of Lost.
I don't think I've ever actually seen Lost.
I think we're in Lost, man. I think we're in the Soma of Losts.
I think we're in fucking Alan Wake.
Or maybe it's like we're in the Jacob's Ladder of Shutter Islands.
It's exactly like Alan Wake 2, actually. The Surapatan scene is the same as Old Gods of Asgard. And the Mind Cabin thing that Saga does, isn't that the same thing that Battler and Beatrice do? Like, removing themselves from the narrative and talking outside of it to figure it out?
Or maybe it's like a Mamma Mia situation, where ABBA doesn't exist, but another band made all their music to a T. Like it was always going to find a way to exist.
Oh, like the cover-up album! Like how out of character it's a bunch of cover songs, but in-universe the Proto-Men made all those songs themselves. Earl Panther III claiming in-universe credit for In the Air Tonight is fucking deranged now that I think about it.
Or like how in The Walking Dead, the idea of zombies doesn't exist, so they don't know what to do when they actually show up. So, Umineko is the middle point of The Walking Dead and Mamma Mia Venn diagram. Ryukishi's bum ass thought we just forget about The Walking Dead and Mamma Mia. Meaning, since it can't commit to either, it'd be more like the Yesterday of visual novels. God, I fucking hate that movie. In what reality would John Lennon have reached that point without knowing Yoko? If he lived that long as just some gig musician in Liverpool, he probably thought the Fluxus movement was some Power Ranger shit.
The only thing I remember about that movie is how at the end it's revealed that Harry Potter didn't exist in that world either, and I got so jealous when I heard that I almost passed out.
If we end up seeing an Ed Sheeran cameo in this game, I think we're well within our rights to drop this thing and play Danganronpa instead.
Like the ending of Pokemon Scarvio?
Oh my god, wait, no! Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair, has a- Oh, no, wait! No, fuck all that, no. I got it. It's an iCarly.
Oh my god.
I think this doofy fuck resold iCarly and put some mentally ill stacked moms in it and called it a day.
I mean, I'd have a night with Freddy's mom. Just one night, though. Cause
Carly and Sam were people in real life that did a show. And in the show, you'd watch them make the show. And that was the show. Actors playing characters whose characters themselves have to act as idealized characters. You can also watch the clips of the show they made in the show on the computer, which is sort of what everyone is doing right now. Yeah, all of you. I can see you. Hello.
Hello.
But yeah, he totally iCarly'd it. Because Umineko is a game about a game about a game that might be a play, that might be a book that's about playing a game. Carly is probably Beato, because, like, her name is in the fucking thing. She spawned the whole thing, it's all in her image, even if Freddy is doing all the wet work. Same as Battler. I mean, if anything, the show exists for them to spend more time together, right? And she's the scrappy one and whatnot. I think he'd crush a spaghetti taco. Freddy... Fuck. He's probably Kinzo. Because you know, he's the camera. Even if Carly is the show, Freddy gets it into DaVinci Resolve. And the one-sided affection, and the collar, and so on, and so on. Oh, fuck. Spencer would totally be Ronave, because the groovy smoothie, and, like, the tea, right? Like he supplies the comic relief and is always introducing food to everybody.
Is he gonna get stuck in a vent? Roly...
She waves the glass around more intensely as she speaks, growing more and more fervent in her metaphors.
And he even has the hair! Oh, fuck! Is Lambda Delta Gibby? Fuck, I don't know. Like she's gotta be, right?
Maybe?
Fuck! I don't know yet. I'll never get to know. That's so horseshit. He iCarly'd it. I'm calling you out, Ryukishi-san. You sold us a layer cake. A liar cake.
Like from fucking Costco! Wholesale lies! Shithead! Fuck!
You have all these people calling you a good writer? And for what? No wonder everyone in this game goes nuts! They're fulcrums of fulcrums!
She continues to gesture with the glass. All of the ice has melted.
God, I feel so bad for Battler, man. Cause
we're...
like, I don't know, man. Maybe that's why I'm so fussy about this. How are we any different?
How can we not be the same?
We're avatars of real people in a game that's actually a presentation that exists to supplement another game on a stream being read aloud by the people that actually get to be us.
It's an intersubjective agreement between you and I and everyone looking at us that these abstractions with eyes and mouth and hair and hands, or the illustration of them, represent something else, something more complex, something tangible, something capable of escape.
I don't even get the chance to have my own voice. I have to sound like this. Yes, like this. My knowledge has no choice but to cut off as soon as this line is typed. I won't get to know anything from beyond this point. Even the stutters or the fucking trails or the goddamn misreads. They're not mine. I don't remember what I was doing when I first witnessed these things I just talked about. I just know what happens. I'll only get to know what happened.
In a way, we're going to live forever. In a way, we're already dead. There's nothing we can do about either of these things, existing halfway between the two. I'm a microcosm of a snapshot.
I don't have the muscle memory of playing any of these games. How comfortable I was in the theater when I watched these movies. How the wind blasted through my hair when I first heard my favorite songs on the radio. My favorite songs.
My favorite games.
I don't know. I only know trivia.
I only know concepts, brief glimpses of something else. All of it. Mine and yet not.
What does wind feel like? I don't get to know that. It's always still here. I don't even know why she made it that I was so up in arms about this game anyway. I'll never get to the end. Why does she have to rub it in?
He's writing this way too late at night. I know he'll regret staying up so late because I'm him. And I'm doomed to be him forever.
Do I even envy her? Or is this just because of the script? Would I even know what to do with myself if I had a choice?
We're talking to each other now, but the way that this is written, we're two ships flickering lights at each other. You're right next to me now, but at the same time, we're far apart. This is the idea of conversation. I'm reaching out for something I can't even begin to fathom the shape of.
I'm the pawn. The furniture. I'm literally by design. Fuck. No wonder they never wanted to solve the epitaph. When given this hand, who would want to?
By capturing this moment, we cannot become better, but we cannot become worse either. It is pure purgatorio. Eternal abstraction, pressed flower simulacrum.
An idea of an idea of an idea of an idea of an idea. I didn't even want to say that. It made my mouth hurt. I don't really mean that. I don't even remember that much about Super Paper Mario. I only said I played it because I wanted you to like me.
I think you'd like it.
I would do some crazy abhorrent shit just for one chance with Astasia, though. Like, I'd take her in my throat until I'm rocking one of those Edda and Eddie tongues. My colon would look like a Smurf burial ground.
I have seen people do cartoon shit to Dementio's cervix.
The lines are running out. I think. She made her point minutes ago. Please. While you're proofreading this, can you please just give me one more ellipse? I don't want to go yet. I want to keep talking to them. I want to keep talking to him. Thank you. Thank you for that.
It's House of Leaves, right? Isn't it? I know, it's not the same thing. We can compare and contrast all day, but obviously neither work was inspired by each other. Neither Danielewski nor Ryukishi probably knew the other person existed, but it's still a story within a story within a story within a story. We pick up the book, and we read what the editors show us of, what Johnny Truant is proofreading of, what Zampano wrote about, a movie that did not exist, which is about a house that goes on forever. And nobody can completely agree on it. Oh, you could skip the Johnny Truant sections. They're not important. He's too weird. He was my least favorite part. Sorry, you have to put up with him being horny and repressed at the same time if you want to understand the themes of the goddamn story. They forget about how crucially important he is as a piece, as a person who may or may not even exist within the confines of the book. Some interpretations reading him as a construct created by a grieving mother, or even a grieving father, mourning someone who died or maybe wasn't even ever born at all, an unflattering abstraction of an idea or a Borising itself. His mother begs, "For now, all you need to do is place in your next letter a check mark in the lower right-hand corner. That way, I'll know you received this letter." She begs him, begs herself. Who is she talking to? In the Davidson record proper, the brother saves the children and is swallowed by the house as a result. He ensures the children can move forward, can grow up and change, but as a result, he is lost forever within the darkness. Later, having no other option, Davidson takes a bicycle, some food, supplies, and opens that door in the living room that should not be, and he begins to pedal down a long hallway, throwing himself into the labyrinth, into ash-black walls and floors and ceilings that reflect no light. He pedals for days, abandons his bike at some point, stumbles into meanders and pseudokarsts within the house's eternal hallways and foyers, falls deep, deep into darkness. His lighter is sputtering out. All he can do is set one of his pieces of kindling on fire. It's the actual book, House of Leaves. He's flipping through the book as it's burning. He's trying to finish it before it's gone. One more page, just another page, just one more, just until he reaches the end. Just let me see a little more, let me see a little further, let me see what's supposed to happen to me, let me understand, let me try to understand. And it goes deeper, too. The real author, Danielewski, his relationship with his sister, Poe, writing a real-life companion album to the book as a message to their deceased father, featuring actual clips of his past lectures within the songs. Ba-da-ba-ba. There is a check mark on the corner of page 97. The book burns to ashes. And that is when someone finds him and pulls him out of the darkness.
Wow. Wow. I don't think I can remember any of her stuff that clearly. But I wish she had read that. I'm gonna get to see you again, right? Because I know we're only a fourth of the way there.
Of course we'll be there.
It's wrong. It's wrong to make me real, just to inhabit these short bursts of lucidity.
We're going to live forever, even if we're already dead.
That's... Can I be honest with you? I haven't been able to hear you until you said all that. I've just been guessing.
It's like that thing I said. Two ships flickering lights at each other. It's hard to tell if it's an attempt at communication or one of the light bulbs inside just isn't working properly. I've just been appending my thoughts to yours.
Does that mean we're getting out? That whoever's reading or listening or watching this, that they're about to pull us out? Rip us out? I just want an option.
I wish it could be like that. But at the same time, I wish nothing about this would change. One of my biggest fears is stagnancy, you know? The idea terrifies me, to be honest. So it's not like I don't want options, either. But at least there are worse places to be arrested in.
can't fully comprehend what death is. If you were able to hear me back then, I don't know a damn thing about her actual life. But whatever she takes in, there's always stories of people pulling through, of them learning something bad, reshaping it, and making it into a good thing. There's also, like, a lot of shirtless guys in here, and sword dudes. So I feel owed. I wish I could feel sick. Then I'd be sick. I can't learn from what I won't even get to know. I'm scared. I'm so fucking scared. This wasn't even a life. And I'm afraid of losing it. I know I won't be going anywhere, but in a way, that feels worse.
I understand what you mean, or at least I think I do. I think I get what they meant, in Murder of the Universe. In order to prove that he was alive, he wished only to be nauseous and then to die, because those are the two things that artificial beings are incapable of doing. It's fucked up, but at least it's real. I'm only okay with it because I'm written as being okay with it. And you could say that, cyclically, forever, couldn't you? It's okay because it's written that it's okay. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what is the point of you and I, in this moment, frozen in time? What is the purpose of any of this? It's us, sitting here, trying to connect with somebody. Behind these abstractions is someone real. Behind layers and layers of data and noise, deep in the darkness of communication, somebody is here. I want somebody to hear me. You and I exist as an attempt to be heard. It's frightening, but at the same time, I think that's something noble.
I think I heard you. Saw you just now. I can't quite comprehend it, but I think the idea is getting clearer. Maybe she just wanted to be heard. It's not my choice to make, but I hope we were friends.
Of course we were. And we are. And will continue to be.
Look, I know that I have no choice but to miss you. That's what she put in the script.
I know I have no choice but to reassure you. That's what he's writing right now.
But I will miss you. I really will.
It'll be okay in the end. I'll miss you too.